Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton here. Thank you for joining us this week. Kyle is somewhere where he may or may not have power. I don't know. He didn't have power a couple hours ago. Maybe he's back. But we've got people who have been going all over the countryside in England and Ireland to check out the latest VR headsets. And I can't wait to ask them all about their experiences quite recently. And I just came from watching Robert Picardo, the doctor from Star Trek Voyager, talking about Pimax with some kind of drink in his hand. And I was just having quite a laugh about that right before I came in here because it's quite the sight. So, yeah, that's happening simultaneous to this, the Pimax event where they announced their latest product. I actually know I've talked to Pimax about it, but I can't really talk about it, or I've agreed not to talk about it until they sort of announce everything. And that's happening at the exact moment. We were just right before we came in here. We were deciding, like, should we go out and watch that and write about this right this minute, or should we just come in here and talk about the actual, hardware we've tried recently? Because I have yet to try a recent Pimax.
Yeah.
Who is here with me this week? Can you guys introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Jamie. I'm paying a lot of attention to everyone, I swear, but I am also watching Pimax Frontier through a nose gap in my Oculus Quest 2 because the timing on this show that was originally meant to be on October 20th is going so well. Clearly, hello everyone. Good to see you.
I'm David Heaney. I'm not watching the Pimax event, but I'll catch up with it after. I'm excited to talk about the news we have to talk about today.
Yeah, it's been a crazy week, and it's going to be a crazy week. A lot of things are coming. So, Jamie, you saw these videos first. I think we should get right into this, the top of our news. Let's see. Kyle is in our comments here. So I guess he has internet wherever he is to some degree. Adam Hartzell, Onakazi, Artful, Meowmix, a lot of our regulars. Thank you all for joining us.
Good to see
All right,
you.
very first story. Oculus Pro leak. Have we seen the Oculus Pro? Is this the Oculus Pro that we've seen over the weekend?
Cast the image.
Yeah, if we have it in the images up.
Yeah, from your story.
Oh yeah, I uploaded it last night at 10 p.m. so I know that it's there.
I see it.
Yeah, so there you go. Feast your eyes if you're watching on video. If you're on audio, go to Upload and check out the article. We saw a Twitter post or thread late last night in the UK, which would have been midday in the US, I guess, listing 4 tutorial videos, I guess you would say, for what we assume is the Oculus Quest Pro. There was no audio to go with any of those videos, I don't think. There was no like direct naming of the device, but it is a very stylized, very Facebooky kind of set of videos. One of them shows like the user being in front of a mirror and customizing an avatar. Then there's some like multi-user collaboration going back and forth between a laptop, using the kind of touch controllers as like a pen, like you can do in Horizon workstations, right? And like one of them shows a dock as well. So for the controllers, so pretty interesting stuff. It's kind of along the lines of the Facebook Connect leaks we saw last year, where they managed to post like an entire tutorial for Quest 2 by themselves, like a week before the event or something like that. I was surprised by the design. If this is real and valid, I was surprised at how the Quest Pro looks. It's like a pair of ski goggles with what looks like an integrated headband, is the way I described it in my story, and like a front pad that would rest on the top of your forehead, a bit like the PSVR, if you imagine the top of the visor there. And it looks radically different to the current Pro 2, so that was surprising to me. I don't know about you guys. Like, did you expect a radically different design? Or
I was saying it looks a lot. It looks very similar to HoloLens 2. It actually looks remarkably similar to HoloLens 2. And people have said that HoloLens 2 is an incredibly comfortable headset. I think this kind of balance between the larger forehead-based Halo designs that we've seen in the bigger headsets and the kind of still comfortable but not able to be worn on a couch or lying back in bed of HoloLens 2 is a good balance if you're designing a device for room scale.
Yeah, and the scene in the mirror, like, what is going on here? And there's that icon. I don't think we have it in our images, but they show a little icon, sort of like it almost. I was wondering what that icon means. Does it mean like you're broadcasting your full body motion, or is it like
Oh yeah.
figuring out full body motion from the headset, or how does that work?
So the Twitter user that posted all of these, who wasn't the original leaker, I cut the name of the original leaker escapes me in this other
Simulia.
one. Yeah, Simulia. Thank you, Healy. At the bottom of that thread, that Twitter user then posted an image of an old Facebook patent that showed full body tracking by looking in the mirror, suggesting that was the way you might enable like a fully customizable avatar full body tracking experience. I didn't know if that was like a actual feasible conclusion from that patent.
Yeah, that really looks to be based on the video here, what this is, and based on that patent. So it's a very interesting idea. This idea that, you know, if you have a completely standalone headset and you want to do body tracking, you could do a downwards camera, but that's going to still have a
Mm.
lot of occlusion cases, and different body shapes aren't really going to accommodate that. But if you just get the person to stand in front of a mirror, you have a clear image of their body that can be seen by all of your front cameras. And it'll be interesting to see if the VR enthusiasts go out and start buying full-size mirrors for their VR room, which is something that in
Yeah.
the past people specifically avoided because some of the older tracking systems and the current Steam VR tracking system doesn't work well with mirrors. But yeah, it's a clever solution to body tracking, but obviously it limits who can use it in what scenarios, and it means you won't have 360-degree body tracking either.
Because I guess it could mean you would then go on a social VR experience with someone, but you would have to be standing in front of a mirror, which is the weirdest thing to implement into the already restricted VR play space setup
It's
for
interesting
most
to
people
think
to
of
work with.
what they're doing with Horizon Workrooms, where you they I think they talked about using actual whiteboards, but you kind of specify a virtual whiteboard to have in your play space, and then you can mark on that or go stand over at it and mark on this wall that isn't actually there necessarily. But what if that? I guess I wonder if that could be a multi-use surface. Like, what if that was also your mirror, and it could also be this surface that you write on from time to time? I wonder if that could work.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I guess in the
Yeah,
same
no.
way we see that you can mark out your desk and you can mark out your couch, marking out a mirror is a natural evolution, or marking out a whiteboard, as you say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else on this, or should we move on to the next subject?
I was
Well,
just
I
going
mean,
to. Sorry, go
the
ahead.
controllers like kind
Oh
of
yes.
reaffirms what we reported on a leak a couple of weeks ago, right? That they've lost the tracking ring. We don't get a super close look at them, so I guess you can't use that to confirm that there would be cameras embedded in them. But if the tracking ring's gone, you kind of have to assume that's the case.
Yeah.
They look
Do
cool.
you think this comes without the controllers? I guess is my question.
That's a good question. We need to know what the quality of the hand tracking is based on this kind of video where the controllers are shown as being kind of key in use. I would say maybe not. Or sorry, as in maybe it will come with the controllers. Maybe they're not quite ready yet. But you know, as to whether these are the inside-out controllers, I think it's interesting to note that this Simulia, who seems to be able to find a way to download the Quest Pro firmware in the same way that people can download the Quest 2 firmware if you want to sideload it manually. That's the same person who was leaking the specs a few weeks ago. It's the same person who claimed to have the dream. So I guess their dream was just them pulling down these firmware files and looking in to see what they find. So I wonder what features that they claimed to have seen a few weeks ago are actually going to show up in the final product, because it doesn't look to have any protrusion below the front where you would have facial tracking. So I'm wondering, is the face tracking also something you have to be in front of a mirror for, or is that something that's actually built into the headset?
I tried to throw up my room mapper video because someone in the comments was
Yeah,
saying they
you can't
wanted
do
to see
videos.
that feature. So room mapper video I posted over the weekend is sort of a tool to visually map out the corners of your physical room and have this smarter understanding of your space. Do we think we'll sort of get that kind of feature out of more advanced hardware out of the box? Like, are we going to have that kind of environmental understanding in by the time this actual hardware is in people's hands?
I don't know if it'll ship with the launch, but if it does have a color camera for color pass-through, there's no reason that Facebook couldn't do that. Other devices that use the XR2 and have color cameras are starting to do that. We're seeing that Lynx is going to have that. And it seems that the limitation on Quest 2 to getting this kind of rich room data is those low resolution black and white cameras. So if they do have the color camera for pass-through, I would expect that over time, though perhaps not at launch, we will see those sort of mixed reality features.
Yeah, people are talking about Portal TV in the comments here. And do you think there's any connection? Do you think we're going to see any integration between Portal line of products and the Quest line of products at this Facebook Connect this week?
Certainly seems possible, right? Like if you're talking about looking in front of a mirror and getting that kind of functionality out there, I'm sure there's a way. I'm sure Facebook want to have those products tightly integrated. Potential to possibly talk about the company renaming later this week, right? That's been rumored, and that they might end up with a new name that kind of reflects their direction towards the metaverse. And if Facebook as a whole company is like going in that direction, then it makes sense that Portal, starts integrating more closely with all your VR gear and eventually your AR gear and stuff like that. So that's definitely a use between the two that I hadn't considered before.
Yeah, the mirror. I definitely think there's that functionality for the mirror, probably potentially within the Portal product, or even with the sort of phone camera facing you. So
Mm.
I'd be curious to see if they kind of integrate those sorts of features over time. We've obviously got latency things to deal with for certain actions, but you might be able to do some really amazing things. Gosh, are we going to get into games? I'm dying to hear about games, but we need to talk about so much that's happening with games, and that's one of the things that we wonder about with whether they're going to sort of be taken to the next level on this next generation
Mm.
hardware. Uh, things like we've got to talk to Harry sort of about his unplugged experience, but things like that on this future headset, Quest Pro, are probably going to be uh, cornerstone experiences, I would think.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at that set of videos, there's on the surface and thinking about it like quickly or a quick glance, there's not too much there that speaks too much to the gaming side, right? Like you definitely in terms of social VR, if we're talking about those full body applications, jumping into horizons and stuff like that, there will be definite applications there. But the two of the videos actually focus on kind of work collaboration and social meetups and planning architecture and things like that. So for me, based on what we've seen this week and this weekend, it's hard to imagine exactly what's going to be there, apart from like ergonomic things, like maybe it's a much more comfortable headset, which I'd probably pay another $300 for in the first place. Apart from that kind of stuff, it's hard to envision how they're going to pitch it to a consumer to say like, oh yeah, your Resident Evil 4 experience here will be so much better than the Resident Evil 4 experience on the Quest 2, right? Apart from, again, like you said, like hand tracking, if you could end up having a much cooler unplugged experience in a couple of months' time when this thing's out, that could be a really big draw. But in terms of like, like traditional motion controller based VR gaming, I haven't seen exactly what's here yet to make people want to make that jump over the $300 headset.
I guess with those small controllers, if you are playing a game or some sort of app where you're interacting with stuff that's very close to you and you want to move stuff between your hands, that lack of a tracking ring is going to make such a huge difference. Because think of even apps where you're moving lots of small objects between your hands. I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, but I can't.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, so let's say in Vader Immortal, for example, one of the things people love to do is try and hold a lightsaber with two hands instead of just one. So the tracking ring gets in the way there for sure, and you kind of have to just pantomime it a little bit. But definitely, you could try and bring one underneath the other in that kind of situation, and that could be a lot better.
And the hand won't be blocked as much by the tracking ring, so the hand tracking itself might be better, especially if they do some combination of tracking there. We've got quite a few people out there watching us right now, and the thing I want to kind of point out I love is our studio is running off of Oculus Quest, built by David Heaney over there, and we've got the Oculus Quest hand tracking, and he's using the high frequency hand tracking, which is able to do a pretty decent job of recognizing my various hand motions in a completely standalone way, broadcast them in real time to my colleagues over here and obviously over the internet to you. But we're using the 1.0 versions of the Facebook avatars. And we would expect, and I think they put us on the timeline to Facebook just listened. The assistant that I can't wait to go away. Just got activated by that. So we're on the 1.0 versions of the avatars, and hopefully very soon we'll be moving over to the 2.0 versions of those avatars. And this is all before there's new hardware potentially powering our expressions and more of our bodies to actually come into future experiences. So everyone who's watching us right now should get a front row seat to an evolution of these avatars. And it's going to be really, really weird to go back to these earlier shows and see what we were able to do with a Quest 2 hardware versus later generations of VR headsets.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that was something we started noticing as soon as we got the Quest 2, right? And our first reports were on how just the better frame rate inside the headset helped us perceive better hand tracking, but it wasn't actually technically better. It's just we were looking at something that looked smoother. And it's definitely going to be a big jump going forwards. It'll be interesting to see what gets announced this week, what might eventually transfer over to the next proper consumer Quest, right? Because the theory behind the Quest Pro is that it's so advanced that it might potentially have features that don't even make it to the next consumer version of the standalone. Or at least that's what we've all talked about before potentially happening.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they decide to prioritize from the future, because obviously this is what we're assuming based on the leaks, a product where cost is not the primary concern. But we know from Facebook statements over and over again that when it comes to their consumer hardware, cost is the primary concern. And Quest 2 was designed to be $299, and you see that in the head strap and in some of the decisions that around the materials and around the use of LCD displays. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much of what does end up being in Pro makes it to that Quest 3 eventually.
Yeah, I'm looking for the image where we first heard the term Quest Pro. Yeah, here. I've got it up here. Why can't Oculus make a $600 headset and put the best specs like Quest Pro 3, etc., please? Looking back at this question in retrospect, it was like it almost wondered that's a pretty specific price to just throw out there, and a pretty specific name to just kind of throw that out there out of the blue. And we're like, could it actually be $600? Or I wondered when we first heard that price attached to it. But this thing that I keep seeing in the images looks like it could be a MacBook Pro amount of equipment, all in a standalone form factor, and that would be a completely different class of product, but one that could be experientially just like if I'm willing to wear it for 4 hours a day, I'll pay for that, right? If it's that dramatic a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it ends up all being relative, right? Like to Heaney's point about cost might not be the concern for this product, but in terms of what you expect to pay for a MacBook Pro or something like that, they might still have something that is a very aggressively priced in that category. It's just not relative to the $300 Quest in that sense, if you know what I mean. David, you're going behind me.
Yeah,
Where are you going?
My dehumidifier turned itself on. I was turning it off before it created a horrible background noise. But yeah, I just wonder, a lot of people are throwing out very low price expectations for Quest Pro, in this idea that Facebook's going to compete aggressively on price. But I just don't see that happening, because their product to compete aggressively on price is Quest 2. And if people are buying a headset with budget in mind, they're going to go for Quest 2. And the majority of people are going to go for Quest 2 if this thing is priced more than $200 more than it. So I don't think they have to worry about price here. And I think that's perhaps what we're going to see, is something that goes for the high-end products without having to compete, because those high-end products are already $1,000 or $2,000 in that kind of range. So I'm not sure we'll see something that's aggressively as priced as Quest 2 in the Pro.
But that's kind of what I mean in terms of relative, right? Like if you price the thing at like let's say even $900, that's still what like $300 less than a full Vive Pro 2 kit, which is an enterprise thing. It's still dramatically less than the Varjo Aero, which we'll talk about in a bit. So that's what I mean. Just relatively, it could still be quite an aggressively priced product for that category.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Lynx looks after the Quest Pro price, because if we're seeing something that is on the lower end and closer to Lynx's $400 to $500 range, that could be very problematic for them. Whereas if it is something that's 800, 900, 1000, I think Lynx is still going to have its own place in the market as a kind of lower cost mixed reality headset.
Yeah, I just saw Nathan in the comments ask, why are we not watching the Pimax live stream? Nathan, because we started the podcast as Pimax's massively delayed live stream started, so we didn't really have much of a choice.
Yeah, it's supposed to be over by the time we started. Yeah,
Not-
so we would have expected to. Yeah.
Not only that, but they said when they first delayed it that their update time was at 5 p.m. Eastern time, which would be like 2 hours from now. So they delayed it and then started it earlier than when they said they were delaying it to. So that's why we're doing this.
The wording of that said by like 5 p.m. So it like could have launched anytime between now and then. And yeah, there's like 8,000 people watching that right now. And it sounds like a really interesting product from what I've heard from talking to Pimax. And we'll be very curious. We're going to have to go back through the live stream to see what they definitively say about price and pre-order dates. Those are kind of like the determining factors for some of these things, because this is such a crazy year across the board for shipping new products. We're most curious sort of what they're arriving at there on those two core questions.
They're doing like the reveal thing right now as I look through my nose gap, and it's basically all the features we were just talking about for Quest Pro, but with like the expected modules. So there is like a lip tracking thing below the headset, and integrated like facial tracking inside the headset and whatnot. But yeah, Pimax Reality 12K QLED is what they called it.
Interesting decision to announce on the same week as Connect. I think these companies think that's a good idea, but I think that's a really bad idea, especially beforehand, because if they had have waited a few weeks, they could kind of wait and sort of ride the hype wave and then bring their own thing. But now they're going to announce their hype, and then Facebook's going to completely drown it in their announcements, and in the general larger tech media, that their point's going to get lost. I'm really confused at small companies that decide to announce in October. I don't think it works at all.
Yeah, I mean, I will be extremely curious to see how much detail Facebook really reveals this week. And let's get into the second subject here, because it kind of folds into what we're talking about here. So the report came from The Verge. It was Alex Heath over there, right? That I think reported this, that Facebook was exclusively, Verge had this exclusively, that Facebook was considering a complete rebrand, potentially... throwing out the Facebook name, or would Facebook just become an app within some larger organization? How does this work, Heaney? What do you think?
Yeah, the report suggested, and what seems to be the most logical, is that Facebook, the company, is going to rebrand, while Facebook, the app, will just be one of their brands. So just like Facebook, the company today, has the Messenger brand, the Instagram brand, the WhatsApp brand, and the Oculus brand, Facebook would just then become another one of these brands, and the larger company, whatever it will be called, is then the parent company, but with its overall focus in both the naming and branding on the metaverse. So, AR, VR, and the digital worlds that Facebook hopes to build over the next decade.
So what are your odds on the names? I've seen there's like betting from Las Vegas on odds on the name. What's your current guess on this umbrella term?
I think the most. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, mine would just be based on how much Horizon branding we're seeing. Probably Horizon, because that just seems like a no-brainer to me, given that you're doing Horizon Worlds, Horizon Workrooms, and you want all of those things to become like those things. If the metaverse play works out right, those are going to arguably be Facebook's most important products in the future. So
Horizon Facebook is this app that's available on your phone where you can like post photos. And
it would just be Facebook from Horizon.
Get in fights with your family.
WhatsApp is WhatsApp from Facebook. Horizon wouldn't be added to Facebook. It would just be Facebook from Horizon.
Yeah.
I still
Hmm.
think we're going to. I think Meta, META, is the most likely, just based on the fact that, as other people have noticed, and as we were discussing on Slack the other day, Mark Zuckerberg's foundation owns Meta.com, the domain name, which
Mm.
currently redirects to one of their medical charity slash research organizations. But that's he's a billionaire. He can just rename that if he wants to. I think Meta makes sense, and it's companies these days like to go for these kind of simple, few syllables as possible brands, and it just seems to make sense to me to be Meta. But the other one I've heard is Connect. It could just be Connect. So I think either Meta or Connect.
Yeah, so Meta has a storied history. They, of course, were a company that had an AR headset that was shown in like a TED conference. Then they ran out of money and blamed sort of a drying up of investors' interest in coming up with anything competing back during that sort of uh, winter of investing in VR companies when it became apparent the PC market wasn't as large as everyone expected it to be, and only Facebook and Sony have really pushed through alongside Valve. These just few companies that have kept at it with VR products, and Meta went out. They had like a bank sale, and then there's this dead AR headset company. They never really gave a whole lot of details of what happened to all that. And it's not really, it's just a name at the end of the day. So anyone could kind of try to claim that. And Facebook has so invested in this idea that they're going to be a metaverse company. It will be interesting to see kind of what they land on. How does it change the way people talk about this company? And does it have does it give this organization a clean slate? Is it, I have these conversations with uh, family and friends about VR all the time, and it seems like when you're talking with someone who doesn't have a classic Facebook account, doesn't ever plan to post an update to the Facebook account, why does this headset need a Facebook account? And why do their parents hate Facebook, so to speak? Like I have to think that happens a lot.
Yeah, I think among, tech journalists, among people who are very involved in the tech industry and who read about this is not going to clean their name in any way. It's going to be a rebrand. People will remember that it's called Facebook, and they will
Mm.
probably still refer to it as Facebook, regardless of what they
Mm.
branded for quite a while. The important question, of course, is among the wider consumer market, what kind of effect will this have on the reputation? And, in a lot of general consumer surveys, people are rarely aware of what parent companies own which subsidiaries. You'd be surprised at how many people don't even know that WhatsApp and Instagram are owned by Facebook. And
Mm.
so we could see that in 5 or 10 years' time, Meta or Horizon or wherever this company is known for what it does in VR and AR, and there is almost no kind of larger public connection to Facebook, or Facebook is just another brand in the same way that Instagram is, and that's how people consider it. So the question is, where along the spectrum are the people who are going to be buying VR headsets in the next 5 to 10 years? Are they closer to, you know, this is just Facebook with a new name and any issues there are still issues? Or are we going to see people kind of embrace the products and ignore the kind of company's troubled history, especially with the current whistleblower announcement?
Mm.
Only time will tell, and we haven't really seen a test yet of will the wider market purchase a product from this company regardless of what the branding is.
Do you think the Oculus name it will still change, like be there just again as another section of Meta or Horizon or
Yeah.
whatever it's called?
I was the one who sort of proposed on my own Twitter account, like, yeah, why not just stick with the Oculus name? Because it's like the product that has the most goodwill, in my opinion, from Facebook's what two or three products, physical products that they
Mm.
make right now. It's Portal or an Oculus would be the things that someone would buy, and I don't think kids are sort of begging their parents for portals. They're
Mm.
begging them for an Oculus, and they potentially like it's. If you think back to the Oculus Rift, it was this thing that like it was expensive, and kids did want it, or teens at least did want it for their high-powered PC gaming rig, but it was just such a small market. Now we've got the standalone; it's only $300. The thing I think I want to underscore right now is Mark Zuckerberg himself announced the original Oculus Quest name. He came out on stage. This is an organization of hundreds and hundreds of people to that time coming together and building out all of their VR ambitions. And he actually goes through the step of naming this thing and being the person who delivers that news to the public. So I would expect he's going to deliver all these big things, and he's going to lay out this vision he has for the next 10 years. I would expect that to be the, like, Heaney, you've kind of joked. How far out do you think Mark Zuckerberg is planning sort of his future company's ambitions?
Well, based on the earnings calls that we listened to and kind of watching his strategy unfold since the 2014 acquisition, I think it's pretty clear that when it comes to VR and AR, it is a 5 to 10-year plan. I think when it comes to other areas of the company, as shown by the recent whistleblower, it's obviously a lot shorter term. But when it does come to these hardware devices and this next computing platform, as he calls it, we are looking at the 5 to 10 years. I think they'll keep the Oculus brand in terms of Oculus. I just think it'll be another one of those brands for the headset that you wear at home for immersive virtual mixed reality experiences. I can't see them making that something wider in their company. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jimmy?
I was continuing to watch the Pimax, so no. It's still going on. 35 minutes in, 40-minute stream now. There's a lot of Pimax.
And I'm seeing in our comments that they've announced the price that I have been told of $2,399, so $2,399 for this system. And Heaney, you were the first one that was like, when I was describing the specs of what they were sort of planning, to be like, if the price is under this amount, this thing isn't real. And it came in over that price, correct? Like it was priced in line with the features that they've announced, right?
Yeah, I'm just seeing some commenter here saying 2,400 to play Beat Saber. The problem is, no, Beat Saber is exclusive to Facebook. That is what Facebook's been doing over the past few years, I think, with its acquisitions of studios, is trying to actually make it harder for other standalone headsets to launch. Because now that here's Pimax's problem, what content are they going to run on this device? Where are they going to get the games? Where are they going to get the big content that justifies a $2,400 experience? And perhaps,
hold up. Is this? Sorry, am I getting this wrong? This isn't a standalone, though, is it? It's a PC headset, isn't it, Ian?
I believe it's a standalone.
It's a standalone headset.
Oh, this changes everything. Okay, all right. Sorry, continue on.
Yeah, so it may be that this is something that is pitched mostly as a wireless PC headset, and it's standalone in the same sense as Quest 2 in virtual desktop or AirLink. And at that price, they're just trying to say, here is the best possible headset you can buy. But I still think if they want to sell this to non-PC markets, they're going to have to, A, figure out what kind of content they want to run, and B, kind of be honest about what kind of content can be run in a standalone mode at the specs that they're presenting here, at that kind of field of view and that kind of resolution. Either they're going to have to run something that is so blurry you can't even see it, or they're going to have to scale down the field of view, the resolution, the refresh rate to run on a standalone headset.
And I think it's going to do that. I mean, Pimax told me that that's more or less the plan. It is going to sort of restrict all of those things in standalone mode to run various things. But Doom 3, I think, was the thing that was in my head as like the benchmark to test something like this in. That was a project that was ported to standalone VR by a fan or enthusiasts, and there's no reason why that shouldn't run on other similarly spec'd devices. But you would, if you're going to run Doom 3 at a super wide field of view, you're going to have a lot more. You're going to have to like restrict a lot of things to get that to run. And so that's the type of content we need to test. And I would love to see more of that type of content pop up over the next year or two, because I think when we see people kind of hacking so many of their existing PC games to run in a standalone way, like that'll be a kind of bringing over those PC gamers over to standalone in a new way.
Yeah, that late 90s, early 2000s content seems great. People are pointing out, the 12K resolution. My point here is just the Snapdragon XR2 cannot actually output at the resolution of this headset. So in standalone mode, they're going to be doing some sort of upscaling. And I just wonder, why didn't they build a lower spec standalone that is kind of reasonable for what the content needed and a much, much lower price? And then also this more expensive headset for PC. It just seems strange to make these the same product, because if you are someone who doesn't have a gaming PC and you want to purchase this product, what you can do with it is going to be severely limited compared to the price and the specs that you're actually looking for.
I'm watching back on the stream, and at one point they have iRacing on there, and now I'm wondering if they're like trying to. I mean, I could be spreading misinformation, so I wouldn't. But the content thing is key to it, right? Like, it's the same problem that every standalone, that every headset manufacturer that isn't Facebook faces, arguably apart from Steam, because everyone's investment apart from Facebook right now has been into hardware, right? And HTC just can't come along and say, okay, well, we've funded a bunch of compelling exclusives for our platform, because they haven't done that in the past anyway. They've chipped in here and there to help out developers and whatnot, but they've never actually built an ecosystem of their own beyond the cool things they do with Viveport Infinity and stuff like that. But that's still over on Steam and kind of, for lack of a better term, like leeching content from Steam and putting it on Infinity in a way. And so that's the thing. When anyone tells me they're doing a standalone headset right now, to your guys' point, we could see some cool stuff from a couple of decades ago in terms of content, but also at the same time, other than that, are you just kind of running on the Quest 2 content that's not exclusive to Oculus? That's what Pico did. Pico arguably have the second best software lineup of a standalone VR headset right now, and that's because they got in with developers like Fast Travel Games that have cool big content that's not exclusive to Oculus, but they still, no one's gone and spent 10 million or whatever building their own giant exclusive to have on a standalone piece of hardware yet. And that's what I'm waiting for, not just from a standalone side, but also on a PC side, because we're here talking about Pimax. We're going to talk about Varjo in a bit, and that commenter said just to play Beat Saber, and that sticks in my mind, because it's like, you can keep throwing all this fancy new hardware at the PC market, but there's no one there really investing in the content anymore. So sort of why do you do that right now? Like, what's the justification, unless you've never played VR at all yet?
Let's see. Why don't you guys look on the comments and see if there's anything specific we should respond to. The thing I kind of want to point out for everyone that's tuning in, we've got quite a few viewers right now. This is going to be kind of a week in VR for the history books. And Facebook, or whatever the company name ends up being after this, I think it's going to be a new age. If Heaney's right over there saying that it's not going to be like a clean slate, it will be the start of marking a new period of VR development. And I think what we're seeing here in all these headsets announcing is these companies aware that there's going to be a lot of attention paid to this market over the next couple months. And that's opportunity for funding, for pre-orders, for people who don't want whatever Facebook is going to announce. So it's going to be very fascinating to see what Facebook does, or what Mark Zuckerberg specifically does this week, to kind of own the fact that so many people are uncomfortable with even saying, "Hey, Facebook," out loud. And I said that, and Facebook popped up in my headset as I'm speaking to you guys. So, I mean, that's it's just going to be such a massive, massive week, and it's going to.
Did he go for you as well?
Yeah.
He's gone.
He's in slow motion. No, he's not gone. He's just in slow motion.
He's doing a beautiful tango right now. But we'll tell him when he's back.
I was just going to note on what he was saying there about hey Facebook. I actually read a report in The Information this morning that had a Facebook internal memo showing that when they changed the Hey portal, activation word to Hey Facebook, they had a massive drop in the number of people that were using it. And I actually remember on
Wow.
this show when Hey Facebook was first announced request, the first thing I said was, that is so stupid. No one actually wants to say the phrase Hey Facebook. And
Yeah.
it looks like from this internal memo, I was right. So thank you,
I'm
Facebook,
back.
for actually noticing that your users don't want to say that. Any other phrase than Hey Facebook would be great.
So-
Just literally anything other than that.
Do you think they're going to do? I assume this is a thing that can be done, like an update to the Rebrand like software or whatever that lets you broaden the phrases you can use. Then,
Yeah, I would imagine so. The report actually noted that they are looking into finding an actual brand name for their assistant in the same way that, you have Siri or Alexa or those kind of Cortana names,
yeah,
which I think would be a lot better than saying the Hey Facebook. But
yeah,
maybe they'll use the overall new company brand as their virtual assistant. So
yeah.
Hey Horizon or Hey Meta or Hey Connect or whatever it ends up being. It'll be interesting to see.
If it's Horizon, I want them to say you have to say on the horizon, and then it comes up. That's such a great idea. I deserve all the money for that one.
It bugs me that also Horizon is the name of the company in the Upload TV show, of course, on Amazon. So if they do rebrand to Horizon, we will have to be dealing with Facebook living out, a rebrand that happened in a TV show first. Thank you for the donation, Big Show. Yeah, there's always the comment out there that we have to recognize that people angry about Facebook or not wanting to use Facebook are a vocal minority, and most people out there are very excited with the value exchange they get for $300 for these amazing worlds they get to visit. And Jamie, I gotta ask, we're not talking about video games this week, but what did you think of the Japanese Resident Evil trailer?
Oh, I thought that was really, really cool. For anyone that hasn't seen that, it's kind of like mixed reality to the extreme of that it puts a person in the worlds of Resident Evil 4, and it's just very, very, very slickly produced. And some of the iconic scenes from the game are kind of recreated in really, really cool ways. It's interesting. I feel like I wasn't such a big fan of the kind of live action. What have you got, Oculus trailers we saw on YouTube for a year in our advertising, right? Like that you pulled the headset over your eyes and then it was in Star Wars, Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, but it was kind of trying to communicate that it was real life. And I think I've always been kind of iffy on that concept because visually and on a sensory perspective, you don't get that experience anywhere near yet. But this was kind of a cool way to build on the work people have done with mixed reality over the past couple of years and kind of really push up the production value. Sony do a very similar thing on PSVR, like their big PSVR exclusives for the past 5 years, like Skyrim and stuff like that. They did really, really cool, like big budget marketing for that was along a similar line. So I think that was cool. I think, it's interesting. It's been a really interesting week in the wake of Resident Evil 4's launch, because I also feel like you see a bit more attention. It's kind of done what Facebook were hoping it would do, really, which is to bring more attention to the platform. It's been reviewed on sites that would usually not bother with VR reviews, so IGN, GameSpot, Eurogamer, a couple of others out there. And it's been positive. I remember when Skyrim came out, there was like, revisiting Skyrim in VR is cool, but it's a fundamentally broken experience, people were saying. Here, there seems to be a lot of goodwill behind the Resident Evil 4 experience, and I think that could be seen as quite an interesting turning point in terms of the content Facebook is putting out onto the device and how much VR developers have learned in the past, like 4 or 5 years now, to actually turn around an experience like Resident Evil 4 and not make it an underwhelming thing. Not make it, even like going back to 2017, Resident Evil 7 holding a gamepad, but now a full motion controlled experience that kind of implements every facet of the quest in some interesting way. It's going to be interesting to look back and see what Resident Evil 4 did for Quest in a couple of years' time.
So we've got two stories here that we should probably get through pretty quickly, because I want to definitely talk a large chunk here about your hands-on experiences with hardware. So everyone coming off of the Pimax stream, coming here to find out our impressions. We don't have any impressions of Pimax, but we have tried some other major hardware quite recently, and I can't wait to talk about those things. But let's talk about this upgraded Reverb G2. So HP says that they've upgraded the tracking on the Reverb G2. Jamie, how big of a deal is that?
So I think the stat, and I could be wrong, is like it's 30% more tracking volume, I think is what they say in the press release, which, it might as well be
Vertically,
jargon.
I thought.
Yeah, okay. And that is important because I was the one that reviewed the Reverb G2 last year. And in terms of the headset experience, I said it was fantastic. It had like Valve index quality comfort. Obviously, the screen, which was several steps up from the Quest 2, offered a really fresh, clear experience. And also, $600 for a headset of that caliber, I thought was actually a pretty reasonable price, all things considered. It was just then you got to the Windows mixed reality controllers, which HP said they had redesigned to be, better, more solid, have better button placement and everything like that. If you just held them down by your waist, the headset was kind of like going in and out of tracking them correctly. So if you had something like a laser pointer on screen, for example, that would kind of be like zigzagging all about the screen. And it was really distracting. Every time in Skyrim, I would bring like an arrow up from my waist to put it in my bow. Like I would see the arrow kind of like jutter and like just like couldn't quite decide where it wanted to be and things like that. So if they've actually gone back and this is essentially the same product, aside from there's also improved support for AMD hardware, and I think there's also something different about the face gasket that escapes me now. But if they've gone back and fixed the tracking, that's kind of a big deal in my opinion. I would easily review that piece of hardware and be much more enthusiastic about it, because at the end of the day, tracking is everything to a headset like that that is pushing for a top end experience. And if you don't have good tracking, I mean, not to echo a press release, but they say it in their own press release. They say good tracking isn't good enough, and it's like, oh, yeah, exactly. You need to have the best if you want people to be really enthusiastic about this product. So it's it's a year later than I'd have liked to have seen it, but I absolutely welcome the upgrade, and I'll be very, very interested to hopefully check it out again in the coming months.
Heaney, anything to add here on this one?
I think Jimmy's covered most of it, but as you say, the improvement here is in the vertical field of view of the tracking, because with the Quest cameras, you have them on the top corner so they can see when you're up, and you have them on the bottom corner so they can see your hands when they're down below. But on the Reverb G2, you have 2 in the front and then 2 on the sides. So that kind of below down at the waist and up above your head, there was a definite blind spot on each. And so it seems here that what we're seeing is a wider vertical field of view on at least 2 of the cameras, perhaps all 4 of them. And as you say, Jimmy, it'll be really interesting to get that hardware and see. I don't think it's an issue of fixed or not fixed. It's a matter of how much is it improved, because they're still not going to be able to see the full vertical spectrum from those camera positions. But if they can see more, the question is it now good enough that it can be used for serious VR gaming? And you'll hopefully be the one to find that out if HP can get that hardware in your hands. Yeah,
because I mean, the thing we arrived at a year ago was that, if you're into simulation games and you have the best rig for Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator, or iRacing, or anything like that, then yeah, this is the headset for you. But anyone else that wants the kind of like super hot experience, or even the Beat Saber experience, right? Like this just isn't an option, because it's going to be affecting your performance. So if they can get back in the game that way, it'll be really, really good, really cool.
Yeah, okay. And then the next big one here is the Oculus Go Unlocked OS. Heaney, how big of a deal is this? Have you unlocked your Oculus Go yet? And if you do, what will you use it for?
It's one of those things where we really can't know how much of a deal it will be until we see hackers and makers get access to this and really see what is possible in the finer details. The Android custom ROM scene for smartphones and tablets was huge for years, and it still is quite big, because what you can do when you have that full root access and the ability to flash whatever custom OS you want, you can do all of the things that the system wouldn't allow you before. That means it could be extra hardware, it could be apps that do things that the system would normally not give permission for. But it's so hard to speculate on that because we don't know how motivated will people really be to play around with a 3 DOF headset that can only map the rotation of your head. How much energy will there really be from the maker community to work with a product from Facebook, even if it is unlocked in this way? So really only time can tell, but the potential is certainly there for some really interesting things to happen, especially when it comes to people adding extra hardware and then maybe building a kind of open source VR OS that can be used in future standalone headsets for community projects and as an alternative to what manufacturers are providing in their sort of closed down stores and preventing sideloading. So I think this could be the foundation for that kind of open source standalone OS from a community. But again, it's a question of how motivated are the hackers and makers that would put in the hard work and effort to do this. How motivated
Mhm.
are they really?
Yeah, I pulled out my Oculus Go sort of in preparation for this release, expecting to do something with it. And I have two of the original 3DOF controllers, and both of them seem to have like batteries that leaked inside, or the contact point
Ew.
where the battery meets the battery compartment is not okay. And I can't tell if either controller is holding a charge. And without that controller right there, what's kind of the point of unlocking this old OS? Even if I could like download a file and preload it with all sorts of interesting things to view on my old headset.
Well, you've just given me a sort of idea for what someone could do. They could make it so that the home launcher, or they could build their own home launcher that allows you to use head gaze and a gamepad. So it could be optimized around playing old emulator games that use a gamepad, and you wouldn't even need to have the rotational controller. You could have systems that are designed for mouse and keyboard. Once people have this access, and even without flashing a new OS, you have root access on this unlocked build. So people can replace the launcher, that Facebook Oculus launcher, with their own. You could see all sorts of input devices be supported because that kind of rotational pointer is ideal for a certain kind of content, but it's not really what people are interested in using these days. You want sort of either motion controllers or, if not, a gamepad or a mouse and keyboard.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting to think about that from the open source sort of setup perspective. Like a Facebook account is required from the outset of setting an Oculus Quest up. What does kind of like the ideal setup system for a VR headset that doesn't require that look like? Like, is your very first thing to pair a Bluetooth control input with this headset? And like, shouldn't the OS immediately make that possible for you to do right at the outset? It would be really neat to see a standalone system that had that kind of user first setup system that doesn't require a Facebook account. I would love to see that.
We could even
All right,
see
are
some.
you guys ready to get to Jamie's hands-on experience? Because this is a big deal for me. The
Ooh.
fact that Jamie over here and David Heaney have actually met face to face and spent a few days actually investigating VR hardware together. And that kind of blows my mind that this actually happened after such a long time working with each of you, and
Mm.
it took this long for it to happen. And also, just kind of like what a breath of fresh air it is to actually have fresh VR hardware to assess after such a long time in isolation. So, can you like paint a picture out there for the people of what it was like to actually have this experience recently?
Well, yeah. So we're talking mainly about the Varjo Aero, which is a headset that was announced last week. And the idea is that Varjo is a Finnish company that traditionally does B2B headsets, incredibly high spec, but also incredibly expensive B2B headsets like the VR3 and the XR3 that also come with expensive subscription software that kind of jacks up the price a bit more. And they're a company, as I said in my review, which you can read in the site, they're a company that I would visit like once a year, would see the latest cool things they were doing, and like marvel at them, write an article about how much I liked it. And then I would also ask them, okay, cool. Are you going to be doing a consumer headset anytime soon? Because, you know, you have all these specs that people want to see in consumer headsets. And they would say, yeah, no, not anytime soon. I'd go off and we'd meet them again next year. and do it all again. The difference this year is that they actually do have that device. It is the $2,000 Varjo Aero that kind of removes the front cameras, so kind of no pass through, no hand tracking capabilities, like anything like that. But keeps a lot of the same specs, so ridiculously high resolution display, a very, very comfortable 3-point fit design, eye tracking, and automatic IPD adjustment, and a lot of other expensive bells and whistles. So the thing about this headset is that meeting Heaney to discuss it was very much a necessity, because I put this thing on my head, and I think pretty much every review of this headset out there says this, is the first thing you do is you notice just how ridiculously crystal clear the screen is. And, looking around VR environments is like immersive, like never before. I could line up a gun sight, and like I wasn't getting any kind of any of that fuzz you might get even on a Quest 2 or something like that. It felt like a solid, real metallic object in front of me, and that was cool. Gameplay wise, it allowed me to be more precise with my aiming, I like to feel. And there was a lot of, it felt revolutionary in terms of the clarity of that display system. But I turned my head once or twice, like within 5 seconds of putting it on, and there's like blur pretty much almost everywhere. And like if we're looking at like a room with like a solid grid right out in front of me, which is what the Varjo base software is, it just kind of all suddenly turns into like this very wobbly, phased, unsolid mesh in most of my periphery. And I am immediately thinking to myself, this can't be right. And then we're getting into like the issue of like fixing up PC hardware and making sure you have the right specs, making sure there's nothing wrong with the headset itself, trying to like specifically explain to the guys at Varjo what's going on, and if it's something that everyone's experiencing, or if it's just something relevant to this unit, or I'm not doing something right, haven't calibrated the eye tracking right, or something like that. And so that's when I was like, I need to get someone that will definitely know what's going on here over to England to come and try it with me. So Heaney came over last week, and we spent some time testing the Aero, and it was a really interesting experience, I think, because we both together spoke to Varjo, and they were saying that this is a software issue. Pupil swim is what you like to call it, Heaney, right? And it's a software issue that they are still trying to fix, even though the headset's technically on sale. And I think the first units are shipping in December, and they're expecting to have the first like Varjo Aero ready software in December as well. So there's a very weird timeline here of, well, if the software to actually properly review it isn't ready in December, why do I have, as much as I like giving early access to hardware, why do I have this thing now? Like, why am I not testing this in December or November with like a beta version of the software? So I ended up reviewing it and saying that, a lot of aspects of this headset are fantastic. Obviously it's a $2,000 headset. You already know if you're going to buy it or not. And the way I put it is that if you're reading this review or watching this podcast sitting on your 6DoF motion platform in your racer chair with your steering wheel and your free ultra wide monitors, and our website is right in the middle of it, and you're reading it from that, yeah, this headset's probably of high interest to you, but everyone else not so much. I think the final verdict won't be here until the end of the year, when we know if Varjo is really going to be able to deliver on what's promising in terms of those software updates, right, Heaney?
Yeah, it's we can't give a final verdict until we know whether or not they can correct that issue. And as you said, some people call it pupil swim, some people call it peripheral geometric distortion. But essentially what it means is that if you have an object in front of you and you turn your head, the object does not look solid. It looks as if it warps as you rotate. And I'm in a Quest 2 right now. When I turn my head, the world seems stable. The objects seem to change shape as they would if you turned your head in real life. And in something like a PlayStation VR, in something like a Valve Index, in a HTC Vive, you're going to get that same solid feeling. But despite this really crystal clear resolution, as Jamie's pointed out, the Varjo Aero just doesn't have that. And this is kind of a known issue with aspheric lenses. So most headsets that I've just mentioned use Fresnel lenses or a kind of Fresnel hybrids. And Fresnel lenses are really good at keeping that kind of geometric consistency, but they do have their own issues, specifically the most hated one being the God rays. If you move to aspheric lenses, you completely get rid of that God rays issue. You can make sure that you get a clear area of view over the entire lens, which is something that is very, very hard to get in a Fresnel lens. But the issue is that geometric distortion is very difficult to correct. Is it impossible to correct? We don't know yet. Sony in the PlayStation VR 1 used aspheric style lenses and actually managed to get almost no pupil swim. It's geometrically consistent, so there is kind of room for hope there. But I am somewhat skeptical that this headset at this stage, still having this issue, is going to be completely fixed by December. Maybe they'll be able to update the distortion profile to remove most of the issue. But unless they integrate the eye tracking in the headset and find a way to do some sort of dynamic distortion correction, it seems very unlikely that they will be able to fully correct this issue given the lens design that they have chosen here, which is just so disappointing given the other specs of the headset, given how comfortable it is, given the resolution, given that integrated eye tracking. But for me, if I was going to purchase a high-end PC VR headset, I would pick the Vive Pro 2 over this simply because of that issue. But
and that's the thing about it, right? Is it's a strange review to write because most of what I'm saying about the headset is very, very positive, and you're having such a cool experience when you're able to put that issue aside. But first of all, the issue in itself is so prevalent that it's never more than a few minutes away from you reminding yourself that it's there. And second of all, when you're in the $2,000 category, there really is just no room for error in that space, especially with something as large as this, right? Like this makes any Vive headset look much, much cheaper than we've all been giving HTC a lot of stick for the past 5 years, right? Like that they've never gone to the $2,000 level with any of their headsets, I don't think. So I agree. It's a weird disappointment in that it was everything I wanted it to be, and then there was this one extra thing that really ended up being a massive thorn in the headset side. And to Heaney's point, no real expectation that come December everything will be magically fixed, but even if they can combat it somewhat, I'll definitely be jumping back in to take another look. But yeah,
So we're going to need a chart here pretty soon. Heaney is really good at making charts, but does anything that require a wire interest you guys at this point? Is it good? What is the market for wired VR headsets at this point?
I think sim racers and flight sim players are going to still not really care about wireless and almost prefer wired just for this kind of simplicity. And I think when it comes to this headset specifically, that is the market. If you're a sim racer and you're playing a sim racing game where you're looking forward the majority of the time and you're not really turning your head that much, and it doesn't really matter to you if there's a little bit of distortion as you're turning your head slightly, if what you want is just maximizing the clarity and what you can see out in the distance, and you have the highest end $1,500 graphics card that can actually drive this kind of resolution, then something like this headset is going to be extremely appealing to you. And maybe even if you're playing the kind of flight sim game where you're not turning your head much, in kind of more civilian flight sim games perhaps, and you're using instruments more than you're using your head to turn, you're going to want this. I would say something like DCS or any of the combat flight sims where you're turning your head a lot, I wouldn't want to be using this headset because that's not going to feel great as you kind of turn back around and the world's distorting around you. So that's where the wire kind of stays, but that is quite a niche. But maybe where this is priced, the margin is sufficient that niche is okay for Varjo, and their main market could still be the small business, to the point where this enthusiast market is just a kind of nice to have extra.
Yeah, I do also think at the end of the day, the real test of the wire, and if that isn't a thing that's accepted in the VR market anymore, is going to be the PSVR 2, right? And I do think there's interest for the VR experience that still lets you be on your couch. Like, that's a lot of what the original PSVR was at the end of the day. Heaney, when you were around last week, you played Farpoint with the aim controller, but you could still have a pretty good experience sitting down on a couch. And Xena, our video editor, when it comes to VR, she prefers to stay seated and stuff like that. So the wireless thing isn't such of a big deal for her. I just think, the reception to PSVR 2 is going to be the proof of or the real test for it.
Well, the reason I wanted to go full circle with this, back to what we were talking about with Facebook and the Quest Pro, is we've got all these new headsets, and you've tried this new technology, this new wired system, but I think you're almost talking about two completely different universes Facebook is competing in, and it's like Facebook isn't really competing with this anymore. I don't think they're about to compete on the largest stage the world has ever seen, and that's with the likes of Apple and Google. So the companies, so Apple, Google, Samsung, these companies that put a device in every single pocket on Earth, almost, a majority of the people on the planet, and Facebook wants to go after putting headsets on those people as the next generation of computing. That's who Facebook is competing with this week with the announcement of whatever. And the reason I kind of started off at the beginning of this saying, Mark Zuckerberg came out and gave the price of the original Quest, and he's been kind of key in telling the story. I don't see the harm in Facebook coming out and naming a Quest Pro this week, giving all of its crazy features, saying it's going to be on the market sometime next year, and making absolutely clear that if you want to get in on this now, you go and get the Quest 2 at whatever price is their entry level for this year, and then be ready for this Quest Pro experience next year. And one of the things that Facebook can practice is if this Quest Pro is 1/10 or 1/100th of the market size of the Quest 2, they can test out buying higher end hardware and a slower sort of buying process that might be tuned for individuals. Like if you go look the Ray-Ban purchasing website, you can go and get your prescription figured into your headset or your into your glasses pretty easily. Facebook could conceivably do that with a Quest Pro. And the fact that it's a lower margin device may make it possible for them to do that. And the reason I focused on the Apple competition is if Facebook comes out with its, swinging and comes up with a price that no one else can match, including Apple, what chance do any of these devices like Varjo have?
Yeah, I think if they do announce Pro or tease it, they will have to give a price, because otherwise it does risk that kind of effect of killing their own product's sales, the Quest 2, if people are going to start speculating that this would be, $400 or $500. But as you say, it will be really interesting to see how this product does affect this higher end niche market that we've seen that HTC and Varjo and Pimax kind of operate in, and whether that market can still healthily exist. Obviously, the fact that Facebook is completely focused on the standalone aspect and Oculus Air Link is still kind of a side thought, and you see, Guy Godin's virtual desktop surpass it in features and kind of carry that PC support along more than AirLink itself. Will that be enough to compete with these devices that are specifically designed for the PC experience? It really depends on what the specs of the Quest Pro are. If we see Facebook go for something that is just a little bit better than Quest 2, then I think there is still a area in the market for the likes of Varjo Aero and Vive Pro 2 and so on. And, whatever Valve announce in future, if the Deckard rumors are true of Valve. But if Facebook really is trying to build the best headset they can and cost is not an aspect, then that's going to definitely harm these higher end competitors, because they simply will not be able to compete on price, and they won't be able to also offer the standalone experience.
Any closing thoughts? Is there anything else we need to cover? What else do we have coming up this week, Jamie? It has been an insane week for the two of them. Did you get any recovery this weekend, Jamie?
Oh yeah, no, it was. I had a lovely weekend, walking and drinking and eating. I felt like an Asgardian. It was great. I don't know. I tweeted at the start of this month, like, it feels so good to have, like, it's been a relatively slow year for VR, all things considered. Like, Quest 2 came out, Quest 2 is doing well. There, until the end of the year, there haven't been any hugely noticeable or notable software releases. You know, PlayStation said they were making another headset, but basically said they weren't going to say anything else about it this year. So it's been kind of a quiet year for VR so far, and it's been nice in a sense to have an October that has been this busy and crazy. And last week, like, trying to review Resident Evil 4 and this in the same week was quite fun.
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to Connect for sure. I know what you're talking about in terms of, like, like the metaverse and how this could be a very, very significant week for the rebranding of Facebook. Coming at it from, the sides of VR that I'm interested in terms of software and gaming and VR design. I don't know if Connect's going to feel like an off year this year, given they've announced Resident Evil. Well, Resident Evil's now out, and they have Medal of Honor coming out this year as well. I'm sure there'll be a couple of games announced, but we really don't know anything in that space for Thursday. So that's what I'm really going to be looking for on Thursday.
Heaney?
Can one of you cast the most recent image, the first image at the top? Because this is what actually struck me about this Quest Pro video leak more than anything, is that we saw one of the videos show this kind of metaverse concept. And what I'm really interested to see at Connect is a real fleshing out of all of this hype and all of this hiring and all of this funding that Facebook has been discussing in relation to the metaverse. And we saw this kind of view of people playing Beat Saber and then going straight into a co-watching experience where they're side by side watching some sort of cinema. And this is what I really want to see from Facebook, something that shows that they're serious about this metaverse concept, that we're not just talking about these siloed, separate apps that don't kind of match the social experience that they're promising. I want to see co-watching where you can sit in a virtual theater with your friends side by side and watch some kind of content synchronized, because that's something we just haven't seen emerge from VR yet. And it was actually one of the focuses of Oculus Go, but never actually shipped as a feature for Oculus Go and was kind of thrown to the side. So let's see whether Facebook has something substantive to announce on the metaverse, or whether it'll be kind of more hype and more future promises without any concrete plans.
I think it's going to be a mixture of both. It would be my guess. A very interesting mixture of both those things. I would be very surprised. I love that we're ending on this co-watching experience, because it kind of is the cornerstone thing that everyone wants. And thinking back to the Gear VR, they had this arcade that you could go into and pay like a couple dollars and have a classic arcade game emulated, or the original code actually sitting inside that system, and you could play on this old system a classic arcade game. But it was lonely. It was only you on your own. And how could you go and share that arcade cabinet with a friend? And here we all full circle with a headset that actually people want to buy in significant numbers, and there's nothing kind of for that right out of the box. You have to download apps for any kind of experience. And we understand that Facebook is, like, again, competing on the biggest market imaginable, and that requires making deals with Netflix and Disney and other owners of licensed content to make something like this possible work across all of Facebook's devices, all the devices that they power. Co-watching on FaceTime on Apple is going to be a killer feature, and I've already been using the sort of Disney Plus co-watching feature. And when you can do that really effectively in VR, it's it's one of those things that's always been promised, but you got to jump through some hoops to make it possible. And I would be really surprised if Mark Zuckerberg didn't outline exactly how they're going to enable this kind of process on the Quest 2 in the very near future, and then on future headsets down the line. And when they kind of bring to bear just how unparalleled the scale of their investment is, like, we keep pointing it out in our podcast, but 10,000 people and how many more that they're just going to hire to work on these things. It is really an investment that is unmatched, to my understanding, in this space. And this week is their opportunity to kind of make that point. And that's even like before we even talk about the things that get you excited, Jamie, of talking about the new games. So it's going to be a crazy week, I think.
We should say as well that we are anticipating being live in here, hopefully after the keynote, to talk about what's been announced. So I see you on a case where you say, "Oh no, another excuse not to stream on Thursday." I see you. We'll be back on Thursday. It won't be a Gamescast, but the Gamescast will properly return in November, I promise.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to digest, and we're going to be doing it on an ongoing basis. Come here with your questions, introduce new people to VR. I think that's the moment Facebook is going to be ready for this week, is they want every person who watches this show on Thursday to come away going with a recommendation of whether they're getting a Quest 2 for their family members this holiday season, and having in the back of their mind whether they're really interested in upgrading to Facebook's next headset next year or the year after. And I think they've got a lot of effort to kind of sell that. And I don't know, we're seeing it in our audience. There's a lot of people out there excited to get VR headsets, and Facebook has the stage here. We'll see if Valve or any other unexpected things happen this week. But I'm excited. It's going to be a wild week. We'll have the latest for you. We will be back in the studio as soon as we can. It's going to be a lot to digest in a very short amount of time. So share the links to the VR Download podcast. Make sure to come join us live with your questions. We will have it all digestible for you as quickly as possible. And we're going to go right about Pimax, aren't we?
Yeah. But one of you knows I'm not.
Yeah, no, James.
Far
James
too confusing for me. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll see you on Thursday. It's going to be crazy out there. Come share the link next time when we're live. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you in the future.
Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in.